It has become clear that Russia wants all of Ukraine and not just parts of Ukraine, and it's become clear that this war is not about NATO. So the Russian politician, Dmitry Medvedev, just made a speech saying that Ukraine is part of Russia. He said Ukraine is definitely Russia. While making this speech, Medvedev stood in front of a map of what appeared to be his desired borders for Ukraine. This map showed 64% of Ukraine's territory being annexed into Russia. And in this massive area of land that Medvedev wants to be annexed into Russia, the vast majority of the population are ethnic Ukrainians. Russians are a small minority of the population in this region. He wants the eastern half of Ukraine to be ruled by the Russians, even though the Russians are a minority there. For some reason, his weird fantasy map also showed 23% of Ukraine's land being annexed into Poland, and some of the other land being annexed into Romania and Hungary. And in Medvedev's map, Ukraine would only be left with 5% of its territory. He wants 95% of Ukraine's land to be annexed by neighboring countries, with most of it going to Russia. Now, Dmitry Medvedev is the leader of the ruling party of Russia. Vladimir Putin is closely associated with the ruling party, but officially Putin is an independent politician. Medvedev is in charge of the ruling party in Russia. Medvedev was also the prime minister for many years while Putin was president. So Medvedev is a close Putin ally, and he's one of the most influential people in Russian politics. So this dude is insisting that the Ukrainian state should basically be abolished and most of its land should go to Russia. And in January this year, Medvedev also said that Ukrainians are just Russians and Ukraine is part of Russia. And again in March last year, he made a whole explanation of why he believes Ukraine is part of Russia. And remember in 2022, right before Russia invaded Ukraine, Putin made a speech going on and on about how Ukraine was historical Russian land and Ukraine was a mistake, it should never have been created, and going on about how Ukraine was entirely created by Russia. And the year before, Putin wrote an essay about how Ukraine is historical Russian land, and Ukrainians are Russians, and Russians and Ukrainians are one people, and that the state of Ukraine itself is an anti-Russia project. Putin also said that the splitting up of the Soviet Union was the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century. So I guess according to Putin, Russia losing land was worse than the Holocaust? While Ukrainians celebrated in the 1990s finally having independence from Russia, finally having their own state, Putin saw this as a problem. He saw it as wrong that Russia was losing land, even though the people in the land that Russia was losing wanted to be separate from Russia. So Putin doesn't recognize the needs or desires of the Ukrainian people. He just believes this land is Russia's and Russia should be allowed to take it regardless of what the people living there want. So both Putin and Medvedev have made it very clear that they do not see Ukraine as a legitimate state and they believe it is Russian land. Russia does not just want Crimea, which is the ethnically Russian part of Ukraine, and Russia doesn't just want Donbas, which is an ethnically Ukrainian region but that speaks Russian. Russia wants most of Ukraine, if not all of Ukraine, including areas that are majority ethnically Ukrainian. And many people in the West often say that, no, Russia's not trying to take over all of Ukraine, it just wants the Russian parts of Ukraine. It just wants the eastern parts of Ukraine. It doesn't want all of Ukraine. It does want all of Ukraine. It has made itself very clear that it wants all of Ukraine. So stop pretending that Russia just wants the southeastern parts of Ukraine. Stop pretending that it just wants parts of Ukraine that speak Russian. Russia wants all parts of Ukraine, including areas that are ethnically Ukrainian and speak the Ukrainian language. Russia's always wanting more and more and more land. For 20 years, Russia completely recognized Ukraine as a legitimate and independent state, and it fully accepted Ukraine's borders. And then Russia was saying, oh, we just want Crimea. And then Russia said, oh, we actually want Donbas as well. And then Russia said, okay, we also want Kherson and Zaporizhia. And also in 2022, Russia tried to annex the Mykolaiv and Kharkiv regions, and now Medvedev is making it blatantly obvious that he wants 64% of Ukraine's land. Russia is never satisfied with the land it's stolen. It always wants more and more and more, which is why if Russia takes Ukraine, it will try to take more land in Europe. It's literally a case of if you give him an inch, he takes a mile. If you support the right of countries to not be violently conquered and annexed by force, then you should be fully opposed to what Russia's doing, because they're literally wanting to conquer the entirety of Ukraine. Not just the Russian-speaking areas, they want the Ukrainian-speaking areas as well. And this all shows that the conflict is not about NATO and it was not caused by NATO's growth. Putin and his supporters love blaming NATO for the start of this war because they were saying Ukraine was trying to join NATO and that was a threat to Russia, so Russia had to invade Ukraine to prevent it from joining NATO. Well, if Russia's goal here is purely to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO, why is it annexing land? Why is it stealing Ukraine's provinces and turning them into Russian provinces? Russia's not just trying to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO, it's trying to make parts of Ukraine part of Russia. Russia's stance here clearly isn't just, oh, Ukraine, we're fine with you existing, but as long as you don't join NATO because we're threatened by NATO. No, Russia's stance here is, we're taking this land, we're taking that land, this area, this is now Russian. That's Russia's stance. It's not just wanting to coexist with a neutral Ukraine, it wants Ukraine's land. If Russia just wanted to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO, it wouldn't be annexing Ukrainian land. Russia is not just trying to keep the state of Ukraine out of NATO, Russia is trying to get rid of the state of Ukraine, which is not the same as just trying to keep it out of NATO. It wants the state of Ukraine to be part of Russia. So don't ever try to blame this war on NATO again, because the war is clearly about expansionism. It's about territorial conquest. It's about gaining more land for the Russian state. And again, Russia is not just trying to take ethnically Russian areas, because Crimea is the only ethnically Russian part of Ukraine. The rest of the country is ethnically Ukrainian. Russia has no right to try and force these ethnic Ukrainians to accept Russian rule. Now it's clear why the Ukrainians are so desperately fighting against Russia. It's not because the West is forcing them to fight, it's because they know that Russia wants to take away their freedom and independence, and wants to turn them back into a subservient, oppressed minority.